Hi friends, welcome to Love and Life's Journey. I'm Chantel. Today's video is 20 of my fall DIYs. Some of them are easier, some are a little bit more involved, but they are all a lot of fun. So let's jump in and get started. For this project, I will be using one of these wire pumpkin wreath forms from Dollar Tree. I'm also using some spray paint in the color of Nutmeg. This is from Rust-Oleum. I picked this color because it's about the same color as the decorative nautical rope or jute rope that I'm using for this project. And you could use this Dollar Tree rope, but you will need about 100 feet. So I'm using the bigger rolls of jute rope, and you can get this at Hobby Lobby or Michael's or even Walmart. I will also be using some of the smaller jute twine just to wrap the stem of the pumpkin in. I'm using this wired ribbon from Dollar Tree. I love the fall plaid colors in this, and there's 9 feet on this roll. You could use florals from Dollar Tree, but I happened to find this bunch for $5 at Walmart in the fall florals, and I just really liked the flowers. They were large and just looked like a quality bunch of flowers for $5, and I love the color scheme with the creams and the reds, so I'm going to use some of these. For tools, I'm just going to be using my scissors and a pair of wire cutters to help cut those flowers, and then I'll also be using my hot glue gun and glue sticks. I usually use Gorilla Glue sticks, but regular ones would work fine for this project. So first, I'm just going to give this wire wreath form a coat of this Nutmeg spray paint just to kind of tone it down a little bit, so when the wires are showing a little bit, they won't be really obvious. Once my spray paint is dry, then I am going to take my rope, and this is a 50-foot roll, but I did end up using about 100 feet of this, so just keep that in mind if you're wanting to do this project. And this, because I'm going to be weaving it in and out of the wire, I can't really use this whole roll because it won't fit through the spaces, so I'm going to pull off part of the roll, just a fairly long length of rope, and then just kind of wind it around my hand to make a bunch that I can weave in and out of the frame. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to put one end of the rope just through that wire at the end and pull it through. You can just glue it along here. I didn't glue mine right away, mostly because my hot glue gun wasn't hot yet, so I just pulled it through and left a little bit of an end, and then I'm just weaving the rope in and out, so over and under, back and forth, and then when I get to the end, I'm going to wrap it around the outside wire and then just go back the other way, going over and under, the opposite of the ones that I just did. So see, I'm wrapping it around here, and then I'm going over the wire that I previously went under, and then I'm going to go under the next one that I went over before. So just alternating back and forth all the way around, and then or all the way across, and then I'm just pulling the rope tight as I go, and I'm just going to continue this back and forth, covering the whole pumpkin. When you come to the end of your rope, you can just fold it under, and I just took some hot glue and glued it on the underside, inside it's not going to show, and then I took another piece of rope and started it, and I just glued the end of it right where I left off and then continued on. Then I'm going to take the small jute twine, and on the back side of the stem I'm going to take my hot glue and just run it along the bottom wire of the stem to start the twine. Then once I have that glued on, I'm just going to wrap the twine all the way around the stem and then I will glue it off on the top of the wire on the stem to kind of hide the wire, and then I'm going to just wrap the twine around the stem um, a few more times just to give it a little thickness and to fill it in a little bit. Then I'll just add a little hot glue to finish it off and trim the end. And here is what it looks like so far. I think you could leave it like this and it looks great, but I'm going to add some ribbon and florals. So here's what it looks like with the bow, and again, you could just leave it like this and I think it looks really nice. But I decided I'm also adding some florals, so I am choosing just a few from that bunch that I bought at Walmart, and I'm going to cut them off of that bunch, and I left about a 4-inch wire on them so that I could just push them through and kind of arrange them, move them around until I got it how I liked it. And then once I had them all arranged how I wanted them, then I was able to just glue them all down. You could also add like one of those galvanized words from Dollar Tree like this, or just leave it without. And I decided just to leave it with just the florals, and I really love how it came out. This is the first topiary that I will be making, and I will be using a glass candle holder from Dollar Tree, one of these carvable styrofoam pumpkins, also one of these glitter pumpkins. They do have these in several different colors. I'm going to use the gold one. And then I found these glittery purple and gold pumpkins in this 4-pack, and I just really like the color of these, so I will be using one of these for the top of the topiary. First, I'm going to remove the tag and the stem from the styrofoam pumpkin, and the stem just pulls right out. It's just stuck on with like a toothpick. And then I am going to paint my pumpkin using just some black craft paint. This is just apple barrel craft paint. You could use chalk paint, just whatever you have on hand. I found that using a foam brush and the craft paint worked really well for this. I did do 2 coats of the paint to cover up all of the orange on the pumpkin, and then I wanted to give this a little glitter, so I'm just taking some glitter spray paint that I had on hand. This is just a gold shimmer paint, and I'm just going to give this a little bit of glitter on this pumpkin just to brighten it up. Originally, I had spray painted the candle holder with that glitter spray paint as well, and I didn't like it. I wanted it to be a little bit more gold, so I actually took just a metallic gold paint and spray painted it with that instead. And I ended up liking that a lot better. So now I'm just going to hot glue my black pumpkin to the top of the candle holder, and I'm just going to center it as well as I can. Then I'm going to take my glitter pumpkin and just remove the stem. It just pulls right out, and then I'm going to hot glue it on top of the black pumpkin. Then I'm going to take one of those cute purple and gold glitter pumpkins, and I'm going to leave the stem on this one and just glue it on top of that gold glitter pumpkin. Then I'm going to finish this off by just tying a piece of ribbon around the candlestick. This is some that I had on hand, but you could also pick some up at Dollar Tree. They have all kinds of different ribbon. Again, I will be using a glass candle holder for the base, and also the styrofoam carvable pumpkin from Dollar Tree. Then for this one, I will be using one of these kind of cream colored pumpkins and one of these small pumpkin clips that come on this 3-pack. And then I will also be using some of this raffia that comes in a 3-pack from Dollar Tree. For this topiary, I am going to spray the candle holder with this nutmeg colored Rust-Oleum spray paint. At first I thought it would be best to spray paint the styrofoam pumpkin, and I tried it with this heirloom white Rust-Oleum spray paint, and it did not cover very well, and it was really sticky feeling, and it took forever to dry. So I did a couple coats with that, but then I ended up going in and painting over it with just some ivory chalk paint from Waverly, and that worked way better. So I would recommend just painting it with chalk paint from the very beginning. Next, I'm going to take a light green paint. This is called Aloe from Americana, but you can use any craft paint or chalk paint, and I am going to paint that medium-sized ivory colored pumpkin, and this one I will remove the stem as well, so it just pulls out just like the other ones, and then I'm just going to paint it with a couple coats of that green paint. I decided that I wanted a little bit more dimension or detail on the candlestick, so I'm just taking some of the ivory colored chalk paint and dry brushing a little bit onto the raised areas of the candlestick, and this is just going to give it a little bit more of an aged look and make it not so flat looking. It'll give it more dimension. I'm going to use the same technique and the same ivory chalk paint and dry brush on the green pumpkin as well. When you dry brush, you want to just have a very little bit of paint on your brush so that just a little bit of it comes off on kind of the raised portions of your project. Then I'm going to take some Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle and do the same technique on the big styrofoam pumpkin that I painted white. I'm just going to dry brush this brown on this pumpkin, and that will help break up the stark whiteness of it. So now I'm ready to assemble this topiary, and just like the first one, I'm going to hot glue the larger pumpkin onto the top of the candle holder. And a little tip for centering this is there is a seam on the pumpkin and a seam on the side of the candlesticks, and if you line those up, then it makes it a little bit easier to center it. So now I'm going to take a couple strands of the raffia, and I'm just going to tie a knot in the center. This just helps hold them together, and it makes them a little easier to work with. And then I'm going to glue that knot in the center of the top of that white pumpkin. Next, I'm just going to wrap the raffia around a little bit. I want it to look a little bit messy, and so I just kind of folded the ends up and wrapped it around, and then I'm just going to glue that green pumpkin onto the top of that to hold it all in place. Then I'm going to take another little bunch of raffia and glue it to the top of the green pumpkin. Then I'll take one of those small pumpkin clips, then I will pull the little clip out of the bottom of the pumpkin and it just pulls right off, and then I'll glue this little pumpkin to the top of the green pumpkin, just on top of that raffia, and again I'm leaving the stem on this one since it is the top pumpkin. Then I'm going to take about 3 strands of raffia and just tie a bow and glue that to the candlestick underneath that large pumpkin just to finish this topiary off as well. For this sign, I will be using 3 of these little wood pumpkin signs from Dollar Tree and 1 of these maple leaf garlands that have some berries and also a little pumpkin on them. And I also picked up 1 of these packets of these metal words that there are 3 words in a package: thankful, harvest, and welcome. First, I'm going to remove the stickers off of the backs of these wooden pumpkin signs. So I actually was going to use 4 of these at first, that's why you see 4 here, but I decided just to use 3 in my final project. But after I had removed the stickers, there was a sticky residue on the backs of these pumpkins, so I am using some of this Goo Gone that I got at Dollar Tree, and I'm just putting a little bit on a paper towel and then wiping the sticky residue right off of the back of these. It works really good. I would recommend not rubbing too hard or it might take the paint off, but just gently rub and it took the stickiness right off. So like I said, I decided just to use 3 of these pumpkins. I thought it fit with the word better, and so I'm just testing out to see what I think of all of the words that were in that package. I couldn't believe there was 3 of these metal words for $1 at Dollar Tree. They were thankful, harvest, and welcome. And I decided that I was going to go with welcome. To assemble this, I'm just going to use my hot glue gun and some Gorilla Glue sticks and just put some glue in between each of the pumpkins and glue them together. And I just want to make sure that the bottoms all line up so that when you sit this up, it will stand without being wobbly. And next I'm going to take my welcome word and also just use the hot glue on this to glue it onto the front of the pumpkins. Now I'm going to add a little bit of color to this. I'm just going to cut off a few leaves, just like 4 or 5 leaves off of my garland, and a few of those berry bunches to embellish this sign with. And once I decide where I want them, I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue to attach them up by the stems of the pumpkins. For this, I picked up one of these copper colored tins from Dollar Tree. You could also use one of the galvanized ones. They have the ones with the jute twine around them. That would be pretty for fall as well. And then I selected 3 different floral bunches that were fairly full and that complemented each other. And then I also picked up this package of natural raffia in the orange, brown, and kind of a reddish color. This raffia is perfect for fall projects. So since my flowers that I chose have kind of this red or burgundy color in them, I'm going to be using this burgundy color raffia, and it really does go better with this copper color container in real life than it looks like it does on camera, but I think it looks really nice with this. So I'm going to take about 3 strands of this and make sure that I get strands that are long enough to go around my bucket, and then I'm going to tie them around the bucket and tie a bow. Then I'll just take a little bit of hot glue and just secure that to the bucket so that it doesn't slide down. Then I'll just clean up my bow with some scissors by just trimming off some of those really kind of crazy loose ends. So here's a trick for making a really quick, easy floral bouquet. I'm going to take the first stem of flowers and I'll remove the tag, and then I'm just going to bend out the flowers so that I'm spreading them all out. So you can see there's a lot of space in between each of the flowers. These tall buckets work really great for this because they are the perfect height. You don't have to cut down your stems or anything. Then I'm going to take my second bouquet and I'm basically going to do the same thing. Remove the tag and spread them all out. And then I'm going to stick the stem down in the center, and then I will just try to arrange the flowers so that they are all spaced out. And then again with my third stem of flowers, I'm going to do the same thing. Just stick that stem down in the center and then move them around, bend them so that they're all spread out fairly evenly throughout the bouquet. And this works great because by spreading the flowers out in this bucket, it really holds together well, and I don't even have any floral foam or anything in the bottom of this bucket, so it's just a really quick, easy way to do a floral bouquet. So for this first one, I'm going to be using one of the tobacco baskets that I picked up at Target for $3. And I'm also going to be using the lid from this cute little Hello Fall box that I got at Dollar Tree. I love how it has the design on the inside, and so I'm going to use the lid for this project, and I'm going to save the box and use it in some other fall decorating. In my little Target haul, I picked up this little string of mini lights that has the eucalyptus. I'm going to be using this, but if you don't have these, you can pick up some lights at Dollar Tree, or you can even use some of this berry garland that Dollar Tree has been carrying as well. And I'm going to be making a bow out of some Dollar Tree ribbon. I'm going to be using this cute red truck ribbon that I picked up, but you can use any of the fall ribbon. This is another one of my favorites, this really pretty plaid, but just whatever you like. And I'm going to be using some Velcro adhesive fasteners. You can pick these up in Dollar Tree, but I had some others on hand that I'll be using because they're a little bit bigger. And I'm going to be staining my basket, so I have this stain on hand and I'm going to give it a try. So I didn't have any gloves handy, so I stuck my hand in a plastic Ziploc bag and I'm using that to sort of help keep my hands a little bit cleaner. I'm using this stain and right away I decided this is too dark and I don't think this is what I want to use. I really should have tested it on the back of the basket first, but I just kind of jumped in and went for it. However, because of the placement of where I'm going to put the little Hello Fall lid, I think I can work with this. So I am going to instead use some brown acrylic paint and water it down. And this is one reason I really like using the acrylic paint more than stain, because I can play with it. It's a little more forgiving and I can water it down until I have kind of the perfect shade that I want, and I really want the wood grain of the basket to show through, so I end up adding quite a bit of water to this, and I did test it on the back this time to get it the consistency that I wanted it to be. So now I'm using a foam brush. I am just going to go over the entire basket and give it a nice coat of this acrylic paint stain. So now that my basket is all dry, I am going to add my lights, and I am going to use some of these adhesive Velcro fasteners to attach the light battery pack to the basket because I want to be able to take it off. I actually made this whole thing so I could change up this basket and everything is removable, and so I'm placing the battery pack on the basket so that I can easily turn it off and on from the back side of the basket. And then I am adding that box lid to the top of the battery pack using another one of those adhesive Velcro fasteners. I wrapped the lights around the stem of the pumpkin a couple of times, and then before I go too much further, I'm going to go ahead and make my bow for this project. This ribbon is nice because the pattern shows on both sides of the ribbon, so I am going to just loop my ribbon back and forth till I have 3 loops on each side, and I am leaving a tail, and then I'm going to make a 7th loop that's right in the center, and then also leave a tail from that. And then you can use floral wire, you can use another piece of ribbon. I'm just using the twisty tie that came off of my little light set and putting that through the center of the bow and twisting it tightly. When I'm sure I'm happy with the size of my bow, then I cut it off of the spool, and then I'm fluffing up all of my loops to make it a nice full bow. And then I'm going to use a zip tie to attach this to the basket, but again, you could use floral wire, you could use twine or string or ribbon, whatever you have, just to attach it to the basket. And now that my bow is in place, I'm just wrapping my lights around, kind of in and out, just wherever it looks good. And you would do the same if you were using like the berry garland for this. And that's all there is to this one. I love this. So here is a tip. Try to find unusual things to use in your decorating. So like using this lid from the box to use as kind of my signage or wording on another project is a great way to change things up and make them unique. And I love this piece. I am really happy with how it came out. For this next one, I'm also going to be using one of the $3 Target baskets, as well as some greenery that I picked up in the Target dollar spot. And in my Target haul, I also found these $1 felt pumpkins. I thought they were so cute, so I'll be using these for this project too. I will be using a little bit of this berry garland from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to use this metal gather sign from Target. You could use one of the smaller ones that come in the 3-pack from Dollar Tree if you can't find these. So for this one, I'm going to leave my basket a natural color instead of staining or painting it. And then I'm going to lay out my greenery and my decorations inside the basket just to get an idea of how I want to put them in. And I always do this before I start gluing things down because I always want to have an idea of where I'm going. And it's a whole lot easier to change things around this way. I decided it would be cute to use some of the berry garland to wrap around the stems of the pumpkin to kind of make those little curly tendrils that you see, and so that's what I'm doing here. I also picked these up at Dollar Tree. I liked the berries on them and the pine cones. The flowers are a little too bright for this project, so I'm not going to be using them, but I do like the little bit of color that the leaves and the berries add, and then I like the pine cones and the texture of those, so I'm going to add those as well. Once I'm happy with the placement, I'm going to use my hot glue gun just to attach everything to the basket, but I decided I didn't want to glue those felt pumpkins to the basket because they're just so cute. I might want to use them for something else at some point, so I decided to attach them using some of those adhesive Velcro fasteners, and it worked pretty well. I did try to attach the metal gather sign with hot glue, but it did not stick. And so I'm using some glue dots for this, and you can pick these up at Dollar Tree. These are just some Elmer's brand that I had on hand, but I'm just taking the little glue dots off and sticking them on the back of the metal word and then attaching them to the basket, and this actually worked really well. This next one is not necessarily just a fall project. It could be used in your house all year long, and it's more farmhouse looking, but I'm going to be using the basket that I made out of the veneer edging. That's an iron-on edging, and I will link that video in the card above and also the description box below, and so you can see how I made that. But I'm going to be using some jute twine. You can pick this up at Dollar Tree. And then I'm also going to be using some burlap wired ribbon that I got at Dollar Tree. And I'm going to use some cotton stems. Now, sometimes you can find cotton stems at Dollar Tree, but these are some that I actually made, and I will link the how-to video in the description box below so that you can check that out. They're really easy to make and super affordable. So I'm going to be using some of these stems, and I'm going to be basically just tying them into the basket and adding a bow. I will be using this wire pumpkin wreath form from Dollar Tree to recreate a fall wall decor piece that I saw on the Kirkland's website for $35. I'm going to be decorating this in more muted farmhouse colors, but you could totally do this in the bright fall colors if you'd like. I'm going to be using 2 of these lamb's ear stems that I picked up at Walmart. These were $2 a piece. I'm also going to be using some of these white berries that I got from Dollar Tree, as well as a couple of these little white pumpkins. These are the ones from Dollar Tree that come in a 3-pack and they have the little clips on the bottom. I'm also going to add in a couple of pine cones. These are just some that I had left over from Christmas crafts last year, so I'm just going to pull out a few of these. And I'm going to be using this wide buffalo check wired ribbon. I picked up this roll at Hobby Lobby. I got it 40% off, which made it $6 for 75 feet of ribbon. And this is really nice wired ribbon. You can get the buffalo check ribbon sometimes at Dollar Tree, but I find it's kind of hit or miss. And since I'll probably be using a lot of this, I purchased this 75-foot roll at Hobby Lobby. I'm going to start off by making the bow for the bottom of my pumpkin, and so I'm going to kind of figure out what size I want to make that, and then I am going to be making 3 loops. I'm just going to loop this back and forth until I have 3 loops on each side, and then I'm going to add another loop in the center. So this is going to give me a total of 7 loops for my bow. Then I'm going to take a piece of wire. It can be floral wire, a little bread twisty tie, a chenille stem or pipe cleaner, and just put that through the center of the bow and twist it tightly on the back to secure your bow. And you can also use this to secure your bow to the wire frame. Then I trimmed the ends of my ribbon, and I am actually going to use a black zip tie from Dollar Tree to attach my bow to the frame, just because I think this will secure it really well. Now that I have my bow attached to the frame, I'm going to start adding my florals, and I'm going to add some lamb's ear on each side, kind of behind the bow. And then I will secure that into place using some hot glue. Then I'm going to add in some of my white berries, and I have 2 different kinds. I have some that are a little bit larger and then some that are smaller, almost like a baby's breath. And I liked using the 2 different kinds because I wanted them still to be white, but I like the variation that the 2 different berries adds. Next I'm going to add in my pumpkins, and to do this I'm going to take a piece of floral wire, and it's probably about 6 inches long. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to insert it into the bottom of the pumpkins. Now these are just like styrofoam pumpkins, so they poke down in there really easily. I'm going to add a little hot glue to the hole that I just made, and then stick that wire down in there and let it set up. Once the glue has hardened, I'm going to give that wire a twist about an inch down from the bottom of the pumpkin, and then I'm going to attach it to the wire frame. And the reason I'm doing this is because this will cause it to actually stick up more and not get buried in the florals or the ribbon, because if you had to glue it directly to the frame, it would be really far down and it wouldn't stick up, and I want it to be a little more prominent. And I'm doing the same thing with the other pumpkin, and then I'm also going to do the same thing with the pine cones. I did decide to add a little bit more lamb's ear into this before I added the pine cones, and then like I said, I'm going to put wires on the pine cones, just hot glue them on, and that way I can make them so they stick out a little bit more. And I know it seems a little weird to put the pine cones in a fall wreath because normally we think of them for Christmas, but I really like the looks of them in this. I think why not? I mean, pine cones are on the ground all the time, and so I think it just adds a nice different texture and variety to this. If you are new to my channel, thank you so much for watching, and if you like DIY projects, be sure to hit that subscribe button and stick around because I do a lot of that here on this channel. So now I am just filling in some places with some more of the berries, and anywhere there's a little bit of a hole or a gap, I'm just adding a little bit more of the lamb's ear or some berries. So now that I have the bottom the way that I like it, I'm going to add a little bit to the top, and I'm basically going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to make a bow and add some greenery and just make it a little bit smaller than what is on the bottom. So here I'm making my bow, and instead of 3 loops on each side, I only did 2 plus the center loop, so this bow is just 5 loops total. And instead of centering the bow, I am going to put it off center just a little bit to the right because I don't want to cover up the stem all the way. Then I'm going to add the lamb's ear. I'm also going to add this pine cone. Now this one was a little bit bigger and it didn't have the white on it. But I kind of disguised it, made it look a little bit smaller by hiding part of it behind the bow. Then I will go ahead and add some berries to this as well. Now the pine cones that I used on the bottom had a little bit of white on them, and since the one on the top that I used did not, I just added a little bit of white or ivory colored chalk paint to that pine cone. So here it is all finished. I spent less than $10 to recreate this wall decor piece that I saw on Kirkland's website for $35. So I'm really pleased with it. I love the color scheme. It's very farmhouse, and it's something that would be really easy to change up if you prefer the more traditional fall colors. For this, I will be using this wood pumpkin cutout from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using this Happy Harvest sign from Dollar Tree, and I'm only going to be using the center portion of it for this project. I will be using 8 blocks out of the Tumbling Tower game that you can find in the toy section at Dollar Tree. And I'll be using one of these metal galvanized words from Dollar Tree. These are in the fall section, and they have the 3 words thankful, harvest, and welcome. I picked up this shiplap 12 by 12 scrapbook paper at Hobby Lobby. They were 4 for $1, and I'm going to be using 1 sheet for this project. And I'm going to be using a little bit of this black and white buffalo check ribbon from Dollar Tree, as well as a little bit of the lamb's ear and white berries that I had left over from the first project. To start off, I'm going to remove that center part from the sign, and I am going to be painting the back side of this. I'm using a color called Wedgwood. It's just a light green, kind of a sage green, but you could use any color that you'd like. I realized that I needed to fill in the hole, so I'm using a little bit of hot glue, and here's a tip. I put something metal underneath it, and that way once the glue sets, it will just snap right off, and if you press it down well, it will make a nice smooth surface. And if you do get any areas that are raised, you can take a little bit of sandpaper and just sand it down. Then I'm going to paint that back side of the sign with the green paint, and I'm going to also paint around the edges. While my paint is drying, I'm going to take my scrapbook paper and the wooden pumpkin cutout and use some Mod Podge to cover the whole one side of the pumpkin, and then I will be gluing that to the paper. And since this is a shiplap pattern, I wanted to make sure that my lines are straight up and down, so that's something to definitely pay a little extra attention to. And I can pretty much guarantee that you're going to get some bubbles in here. I just worked them out as much as I could, and I had an area that didn't stick really well, so I added some more Mod Podge and then just rubbed it as much as I could. And some of the wrinkles will work their way out as it dries, so don't be too concerned about that, and especially in the center because we're going to be gluing that other pumpkin on top. So while the Mod Podge is drying, I'm going to take 8 of those tumbling tower blocks and I'm going to glue them together 4 in a row so that I have 2 rows of 4. Then I'm going to take some brown craft paint. I'm going to add a little bit of water to it, water it down, and this will make it more like a stain. You can use a stain. I just like using the acrylic paint because it's less messy and easier to clean up and gives you basically the same effect. Now that the Mod Podge is dry, I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and go all the way around the edges with that, and this will give you a nice edge. It's a little easier than trimming it with scissors, which is hard to get a close cut. And because this is a piece that could sit on a table or on a shelf, I did want to finish the back, so I am just painting the back with some ivory colored chalk paint. I'm also going to take the ivory chalk paint and just dry brush a little bit onto the green pumpkin that I painted, just to give it a little bit more of a worn farmhouse look. Now I'm going to use some hot glue and I'm going to attach that green pumpkin to the center of the shiplap pumpkin. So really you could use any of these 3 words. They had harvest and welcome and thankful. I decided to use thankful, and I think that will be great to have out for fall all the way through Thanksgiving, and so that was what I chose. I did, however, decide to paint my word using some black spray paint. And I'm going to attach it using a little bit of E6000 and a little bit of hot glue. Then I'm just going to add a little sprig of the lamb's ear with a little bit of the berries. I'm going to glue that to the base of the stem, and then I'm going to tie it just a simple bow with that buffalo check ribbon and glue that on there as well. Next I'm going to take one of my strips of 4 little tumbling tower blocks that I glued together and painted, and I'm going to glue that to the front of the pumpkin, centered and flush with the bottom of the pumpkin, because this is going to make the stand so the pumpkin will stand up. And then I will take the second one and I will hot glue it to the back of the pumpkin in the same way. So basically the pumpkin is going to be sandwiched between these 2 strips of wood. And that's all there is to this project. Pretty easy, and I think it turned out great. I'll be using this luau garland as well as some florals from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using some wood letters. I did pick these up at Dollar Tree. And I'm going to be using some fall ribbon. I really like this one. It is a burlap ribbon with some glittery fall leaves on it. And it's going to go perfect with that burlap garland. To paint my letters, I'll be using some brown acrylic craft paint, and I am using wood letters to spell out the word fall. I'm going to use my brown paint to paint the fronts and the edges of my letters. Next, I'm going to remove those cute little toucans from this banner, and then I'm going to take off the letters. I did try to just pull off the letter, and that did not work very well. The glue stayed stuck more to the banner than it did on the letter. So I decided to get my heat gun out and heat up the back side of each of those banners just a little bit, and then those letters pulled right off. And the glue stuck to the back of the letter and not on the banner. Next, I'm going to glue my letters to the center of each of those banners, and I'm using hot glue. I did put cardboard underneath so that when the glue goes through the burlap, which it will, it sticks to the cardboard and not my table. And I think it's always a good idea when hot gluing things to burlap to use some of those fingertip protectors that you can pick up at Dollar Tree in the Crafter's Square section, because the hot glue will squish through the burlap as well, and it's really easy to burn your fingers. Not that I know about that or anything. I wanted there to be about 7 inches between each of the letters on my banner, and this will give me enough space to add my flowers and ribbons. And so I just measured that, and then I'm going to pull off the flowers, and I'll be gluing those to the twine. I'm going to glue the flower on the twine right in the middle between 2 of the letters. And then I'm going to cut about an 8-inch piece of ribbon to tie on each side of each flower. I'm also going to tie a ribbon on each end of the word and then add a burgundy colored flower at each end, and I think this just frames it and makes it look really cute. I love these flowers from Dollar Tree because they also have the burlap fabric, so it really ties this project together. So once I got this hung up, I really liked it, but I decided I didn't like the 3 lighter colored flowers in the middle, so I decided to switch out that center pale yellow flower for another burgundy flower. And I really like how this looked so much better. For this next project, I will be using this little wall shelf decor, and this is the one that is hollow inside, and you need it to be that way for this project. I'll also be using 7 of these tumbling tower blocks and some miscellaneous florals from Dollar Tree. And I had these 2 little pumpkins that I got at Dollar Tree. They're the ones that come in a 3-pack, and they were originally white. I painted them with this green color and put a little bit of a glitter shimmer paint over the top, and I'm going to be reusing those for this project. And I picked up this cute little Farmhouse monogram pumpkin at Dollar Tree as well. And to add a little touch of light, I'm going to be using 2 of the LED tea lights. These come in a 2-pack from Dollar Tree. With the wall art piece upside down, I am going to glue 3 of the tumbling tower blocks into the center of it, just using some hot glue, and I am leaving that little hanger piece that's already attached in this, and that's going to make a little platform for my little farmhouse monogram pumpkin to sit on. Then I'm going to glue 2 of the tumbling tower blocks on each side, kind of centered between that center platform and each end. And these are going to make little platforms for my little candle tea lights to sit on. I purposefully made these shorter than the one in the center because I wanted the tea lights to sit a little bit lower. So now I'm just going to start assembling this. So I'm going to set my pumpkin in the center and my tea lights on either side. And then I am just going to take some of my florals and start playing around with filling in the rest of the space. And this is just really personal preference and how you like the look of it, the colors that you want to use, and that's really it. I just kind of played around with it until it looked good to me. At first I thought I might use some of these berries, but they were just too big, so I got some of these decorative glitter pumpkin picks from Dollar Tree, and I'm just placing a few of those in there as well, and they really added just a little touch of sparkle to this. And this project is so easy because you don't even have to paint the little container that the arrangement is in, and it's really quick and easy to put together. I love how this looks, and it's a great small centerpiece for a small space or even just to put on a shelf. For this, I will be using 4 of these Beware signs from Dollar Tree that they have in their Halloween section. I'll also be using 2 of these witch feet stakes, and these are going to be used for the brim of the hat. First, I'm going to cut off the ribbon hangers that are on the 4 signs, and then using some wood glue, I'm going to glue them together. You could use E6000 or some other type of strong glue to do this, but I'm just using wood glue because that's what I have on hand. Now I'm going to flip one of the signs around so it's upside down, and the reason I'm doing this is so that the holes are not on the same ends. So when I flip them together, I'm going to put the right sides together, so you're going to see the back side of these signs. And then this is going to make it so the holes don't go all the way through, and it will be easier to fill them with some wood filler. Then I'm going to take a generous amount of my wood glue and just glue these signs together. And then I will repeat this for the other 2 signs. Then I'm going to take these two pieces that I glued together and I will glue them together down the middle as you see here. And just a note, you don't want to get too much glue in the center here because I had a little bit of trouble with it kind of seeping out through the seam, which wasn't a big deal on this top part because I could wipe it off, but underneath I wasn't able to wipe it off and it kind of glued itself to my cardboard underneath, and so I had to kind of scrape and sand that off. So just something to be aware of when you're gluing these together. Then I'm going to push them together, make sure they're all lined up, and I'm going to add some heavy things to the top to hold it all down and together while it dries. And I did decide to use some clamps because I had them on hand. I don't think that you have to do this if you don't have clamps. I will put a link in the description box below for some clamps like the ones that I have. These are really handy to have for these types of projects, so if you're interested, the link is in the description box below. While my glue is drying, I am going to take the two witch feet stakes. I don't know what to call those. I guess that's what they are. But I'm going to pull the witch's feet off of the stakes, and they're just stapled on, so I just did this carefully so I didn't break anything, but they pulled right off. And then you could use those for a different project if you like. Then I used a hammer to tap the staples out a little bit, and then a screwdriver to kind of pry them up, and then some needle nose pliers to pull them out. So the main thing is they did have a tendency to break off, so you just want to do this carefully and make sure you get a hold of them well so that you can pull them out. Next, I need to cut down the stakes, and I want to get rid of that pointed end. So from the flat end, I'm going to measure 16 inches and then cut down the stakes. I'm going to be using a miter box and saw to cut down these stakes. You can get these really inexpensively. I think they have them at Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Amazon, and so I'll put a link in the description box below, but these are really handy for cutting small projects. You just put your project in there, put your wood piece in there, and just use the guide and saw it. You can saw angles or straight. It just is a really handy tool, and it's not very expensive. And I'm just using a piece of sandpaper to sand the edges, kind of round the corners a little bit, and just get off any rough spots. And as I said earlier, I had some glue kind of seep through that seam and stick to the cardboard, and so if that happens to you, you just want to make sure to take some sandpaper or a sanding block and just sand that down as smoothly as you can. Then I'm going to take some wood filler, and I got this at Hobby Lobby. You can pick it up at any hardware store, but I'm just going to take a little bit of that and a putty knife and fill those holes, and so that I'll have a smooth surface to paint. And once the wood filler is dry, I'm just going to take a little bit of sandpaper and sand it down so that it's nice and smooth. Next, I'm adding the brim of the hat to this piece, and I wanted it at an angle, and so I just kind of eyeballed it to see where I wanted it, and the high end was about 8 inches from the top and about 10.5 on the low end, but I just marked on the wood where I placed it so that I would know where to put the glue and then glue it down. And if you add a little bit of hot glue to this during this step, then you won't have to weight this down and wait for the glue to dry. I didn't do that on this first one, but I did do it on the other side. When you glue the brim piece onto the other side, you just want to make sure that it lines up perfectly with the first one. I decided to paint the snowman first, so I am going to be using some black craft paint. This is apple barrel that I picked up at Walmart for really cheap, like 59 cents or something like that. And I'm going to paint the snowman's hat using this. I'm also painting the brim and all of the edges of the hat with the black as well. And right about now is when I am wishing that I would have painted the brim before I glued it on, because it was a little tricky to paint this bottom edge of the brim. I'm just using a napkin and I put it up against the edge to help cut that in a little bit easier. And next I'm going to paint the snowman's face with ivory chalk paint. And I did have to do 2 coats of this. Actually, I did 2 coats of the black on the hat too, just to make sure it all had good even coverage. And then again, I'm also painting the sides and the bottom of the snowman's head. Next, I'm going to use a yardstick and I'm going to draw some lines because I want to make this look kind of like it's shiplap. So this would have been easier if the brim of the hat wasn't on it already, but I'm just lining it up along every other little notch in the top and the bottom, so that I'm going to end up with, it looks like 4 slats. So here you can see I've drawn lines on every other notch, and that gives me 3 lines, so it's going to divide it into 4 sections. I'm going to be using some Waverly elephant colored chalk paint and a really tiny liner brush, and I'm going to paint my lines on. If you're not comfortable with painting the lines, you can certainly use a Sharpie marker or paint marker to draw the lines on instead. One tip if you want to paint your lines on is to get a little water and mix it into your paint, and that will make the paint flow a little bit better. Just make sure you don't have any drops of water on your brush because they'll drip onto your project and make a mess. But just adding a little bit of water to your paint will make it flow better, and then you can just practice doing those nice thin lines. If you do happen to make a mistake, you can always wipe off what you can, paint over it with the white paint, let it dry, and then try again. Then I'm going to take a bigger, fuller brush and get just a little bit of paint on it, brush off the excess, and then I'm going to dry brush a little bit on all over the white part of the project. I'm going to go along the edges and just make it look a little bit worn and distressed. Then I'm going to paint the lines on the hat and do the dry brushing using the same elephant colored chalk paint, just like I did on the white part. Next, I'm going to trace the snowman's face pattern onto the piece, and I do have a link in the description box below where you can download this if you're not comfortable drawing your own snowman face. And if you need to use the pattern, you can just flip it over, and on the back side rub with a pencil across every part of the pattern like you see me doing here. And then once you have that all covered with the pencil lead, then you can flip it over and then trace over the pattern with your pencil, and that will transfer the pattern to your wood piece so that you can see where to paint. Again, I am just using the black apple barrel craft paint and a paintbrush. Again, if you're not comfortable painting this, you can certainly use paint markers or Sharpies to do this. It's totally up to you. Next, I'm going to paint the nose just using some orange craft paint that I had on hand. You can use any brand or shade of the orange that you have or pick up. And I did have to do several coats of the orange paint on this. Then I'm going to take some pink colored paint. This is called Gooseberry Pink. It's by Americana. Any kind of blush colored pink will do. And I have a stipple brush that I put a little bit of paint on, and I'm taking the excess off, and then I'm just going to kind of pounce around in a circle right above where the ends of his mouth are, and this is going to make some cheeks. And a tip here is you want to start light because you can always go darker, but if you go too dark then you have to paint over it, and so it's best just to start light and add as you go. And another tip, if you don't have this kind of a paintbrush, is you can just use a napkin and kind of twist it to make a point, and I'll actually show you how I did that when I do the Scarecrow side. And then I'm going to just take my brush and some more of that black craft paint and paint his mouth. Whenever I paint faces, I always add this one little detail that just brightens it up. You want to take a small paintbrush and use the end of it, dip it in some white paint, and get a little bit of the excess off, and then just do a little bit of a dot right on the eyes. I usually do it kind of in the top corner of each eye, and that just brings those eyes to life and just makes it more whimsical. I'm also adding a little bit of detail to the nose. I'm just taking a little bit of that ivory colored chalk paint and adding a few lines where the nose kind of dips in on the top, and then a few highlights along the top edge. And then I'll also be taking some truffle colored chalk paint and adding a little bit of shading to the bottom of the nose. This looks a little bit more like shadow, and it just adds some dimension and detail to it. And this is something that could be done using a fine tip paint marker as well. And now the snowman face is done. I think it is adorable. It's so cute. So once all that paint is dry, then it's time to flip it over and work on the Scarecrow face. If you have any dust from sanding on your piece, make sure you wipe that off. And then for the Scarecrow, I'm going to be using the truffle colored chalk paint, and then another Waverly chalk paint called Cashew. It's a little bit more yellow than the ivory. Again, I'm doing the same steps that I did before with the snowman. I'm drawing the lines so that I can have those 4 sections to make it look like shiplap. And to paint the lines for the Scarecrow, I'm going to add a little bit of the cashew to the truffle, and I'm going to mix a color because I didn't want it to be too stark or dark or stand out too much. So I decided to mix a color. If you have a color that is, you know, kind of in between those two, lighter tan or brown, you can just use that, but I decided to mix my own, and so I just mixed them until I got something that I was happy with. And then I'm going to do the same steps and put the lines on the whole piece, his hat and his face. Then once the lines are done, I'm going to take that bigger brush and do the dry brushing along the edges and basically all over the piece. And I actually add a little bit more dry brushing to the Scarecrow because I want him to look a little bit more distressed. Once again, I have a pattern for the Scarecrow's face. The link is in the description box below to download that so you can print it off. And I'm going to do the same steps and transfer that to my piece. Then using the black craft paint and that same orange color that I used on the snowman, I'm going to paint the Scarecrow's face. Then I'm going to take that same gooseberry pink color, and this time I'll show you how I did the cheeks using a napkin. If you don't have one of those stipple brushes, I just kind of wrapped it around my finger and dipped it in the paint. And again, I just started really light because I didn't want to get too much, but then I'm just kind of adding it in a circle, and as you can see, it has pretty much the same effect as the stipple brush. Then I paint his mouth, and I also decided to add some eyelashes to this. At first I was a little nervous that it would make it look a little feminine, but I don't think it did. I think it just kind of added a little bit more whimsy to his eyes. And then of course I'm going to add that white dot in his eyes to brighten them up. It did take several coats of the orange paint to cover up that line that went down the middle that I painted, so it might be a good idea to trace the face on before you paint the lines and then not paint a line through the middle of the nose. Once the paint is completely dry, I'm going to take this clear matte sealer by Rust-Oleum. I picked this up at Walmart. It's about $3.96. And I'm going to spray the one side with a light coat of this just to help protect it. Then when that's dry, I'm going to turn him over and do the same thing for the other side. Once the sealer's totally dry, it is time to add some embellishments. For the Scarecrow, I'm going to be using some of this burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree, as well as some raffia. You can pick this up at Dollar Tree too. And then I'll also be using one of these flowers from this bunch I picked up at Dollar Tree. It says it's a daisy, and I guess it looks like that, but it also reminds me of a sunflower, so I'm going to use that. First I'm going to cut a square of that burlap ribbon. Now this stuff frays really badly, and I decided to use hot glue to attach this first one. Really, I think Mod Podge is a better idea. It's kind of messy, but I think it adheres it much better and helps keep the fraying down. But for this one, I attached it with hot glue. Next, I'm going to take several pieces of raffia and I'm just going to glue it along the bottom edge of the hat so that it looks like the Scarecrow's hair. Then I'm going to take about 3 strands of raffia, and I don't know, these are probably about 12 or 14 inches long, and then I'm just going to tie them into a bow. Then I'm going to glue the raffia bow to the top of the brim of the hat and add one of the flowers. And I actually meant to put these on the other side to kind of offset that fabric patch, but since I didn't do that, I decided to add a little bit of a patch on the other side of the hat to kind of balance it out. Sometimes when you're crafting, you just have to improvise. For this patch, I decided to use the matte Mod Podge, and I think it worked a lot better. It took quite a while to dry, but I just brushed some onto the burlap ribbon, and then I stuck it down and brushed some more over the top, and then I just let it dry. And it does dry clear. I know it looks white here, but it will dry clear, and this really helps keep that burlap ribbon from fraying. Now that the Scarecrow's done, it's time to add some embellishments to our snowman. I'm using this burlap ribbon I picked up at Dollar Tree last year, but I'm sure they will have something very similar to that. And this has a nice holly design to it, and I'm going to use that over the top of the brim of the hat. This was pretty easy to glue on with the hot glue, so I decided to use that. And because the ribbon is burlap and the hot glue seeps through, it's good to use that finger protector. Next, I'm going to add just a little bit of pine greenery to that hat band, as well as a little sprig of red berries. And for my last step, I'm going to trim off the extra ribbon that is hanging over the edges of the hat. And he's finished. I love this. It is so cute. It's just a decor piece to stand up anywhere. I have it on my hearth here, on the Scarecrow for fall, and then as soon as Thanksgiving's over, I can flip it over and have the snowman. I am so happy I decided to do this project. I know that it had a lot of steps and it was kind of involved, but I hope you decide to try it. It's well worth it. It turned out so cute. My inspiration for this piece is this natural wooden pumpkin from the Kirkland's website, and it is $35. To make this, I'm going to be using this Bandit wood veneer edging. It is a pre-glued iron-on edging that I picked up at Lowe's for about $7. And just because I already had these on hand, I'm going to be using one of these little sticks from Dollar Tree as the stem of my pumpkin, but you could totally use a stick from your yard. And I'll be using a little bit of this white and green berry garland that is also from Dollar Tree. I will be using my iron set on the cotton setting for the veneer edging, and I'll also be using some scissors and a ruler and my hot glue gun. For the first step, I will be taking the wood veneer edging and I am going to cut 8 pieces that are 24 inches long. Then I'm going to take 2 pieces and put them together with the adhesive sides facing together on the inside, and I decided to put a towel down just to help protect my work surface from the hot iron. And I did find it is easiest if you kind of weight down that other end because it wants to curl up, and then I'm going to take the iron and just press these together, and it doesn't take very long just to seal them together. And once they are stuck together, the wood edging will be pliable and while it's warm, and so you want to take it and form it into a circle while it is still warm, and then hold it in place while it cools. This just takes a minute or so, and then it will hold its shape. And then you'll repeat this process for all of the pieces that we cut so that you end up with 4 circles. Next, I'm going to take one of the circles. I am going to overlap the ends just about an inch or so and hot glue this together and hold it in place till it's set. I didn't glue all 4 circles at once before I started assembling this because I wanted to be able to adjust them while I'm assembling my pumpkin if necessary. So I'm going to take 2 of my circles and place one inside the other with the seam edges at the bottom, and I'm just making sure that they are perpendicular to each other and that it all looks even, and then I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue at the intersections to glue it together. Then I'm going to take my third piece and make sure it just fits in there nice and snug, and I'll glue the ends together and then glue it inside those 2 first pieces that I've already glued together. Now I'm going to finish putting the pumpkin together. And again, I'm taking that last piece, and before I glue it into a circle, I'm just making sure that it fits right and kind of measuring how much I need to overlap so that it fits snug, but it isn't too big or too small. Then I'm going to glue those ends together and then glue it into the pumpkin. Now, as you can see, it doesn't want to stand up straight. It wants to kind of lay over on its side. So I'm going to take just a little piece of this paint stir stick that I had left over from some other project, and I am going to just cut a piece of that big enough to put on the bottom just as a little stand to make it stand up straight. I'm just going to attach the pumpkin to the little wood stand with some hot glue. Next, I'm going to find one of these wood pieces that I think will look good as a stem, and I think they're a little bit long, so I am going to use my miter box and saw and cut it down a little bit as well. Then again, using a little hot glue, just glue that to the top of the pumpkin. Now I'm going to take some of that berry garland from Dollar Tree and just wrap some around the stem and twist it and make it look like those little vines that you see on pumpkins. So I did add a little bit of hot glue on that berry garland just to help hold it in place. And you can add as little or as much of this as you want. It's just kind of your personal preference. But I really think this is cute and a great finishing touch for this pumpkin. And then you can add a Dollar Tree LED candle to this, and it just makes a really cute fall lantern. And obviously, for safety reasons, do not use a real candle because this is made of wood, so it is flammable. But I really love how my pumpkin came out, and the Kirkland's one was $35, mine only $5 because I am able to make a second pumpkin about half the size using the supplies that I already have as well. I'm using a 12-inch wood blend wreath from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using 2 of these 5-foot leaf garlands, and I tried to pick ones that had more green and brown in them instead of reds and oranges, just because of the color scheme I wanted to go with for my wreath. I picked up 2 of these packages of these miniature pumpkins on the clips. I actually ended up only using 1 package of these. I'm also going to be using some of this Krylon Glitter Shimmer Spray. I picked this up at Hobby Lobby. The regular price is $6.99, but I used a 40% off coupon, which made it just over $4. And I'm going to add this galvanized thankful word to my wreath, and this is out of the package of 3 words that you could get at Dollar Tree. They have thankful, harvest, and welcome in this package. I was originally looking for some type of berries to put into my wreath, but I didn't see any at Dollar Tree that kind of fit into my color scheme, so I did find these floral stems. This is one called Gypso, the white one, and this green one is just called Mini Flower with Grass. And all I'll be using to assemble this is my hot glue gun with some Gorilla Glue sticks. First, I'm going to spray my pumpkins with some of the Glitter Shimmer Gold glitter spray, and you'll notice that I have 3 green pumpkins here as well. I originally painted 3 pumpkins green thinking I was going to use them, but I didn't like the way they looked in the wreath, and so I ended up just using the 3 white pumpkins. Next, I'm going to remove all of the leaves off of the garland and lay them out, and then I will be spraying all of the leaves with the glitter spray as well. I really like how this glitter spray looks. It's not a real coarse glitter, so it just gives everything a really nice shimmer. Next, I'll be laying out those white flowers and giving them a little bit of a spritz of that glitter, and then I'll do the same thing with those green flowers just to give everything a beautiful glittery shimmer. I wanted to keep the galvanized look of the thankful word, but I did want to make sure it tied in and looked like it belonged in the wreath, so I'm spraying it with some of the glitter spray as well, just to kind of elevate the look of it. So now I'm ready to start assembling my wreath, and I'm going to take some of the leaves and just tuck them down into the wreath, just kind of here and there, not really making it really full, just adding a few leaves around the entire wreath to start with, and then I will secure those with a little bit of hot glue. Then I'm going to take my 3 white pumpkins and place them on the wreath, just spacing them evenly and then securing them with a little bit of hot glue. After I have the pumpkins on, then I am going to add a few more leaves and just start filling in some of those bare spots on the wreath. So before I fill in too many leaves, I want to add some of these green flowers to the wreath. So I'm going to cut some of those off the stem and just push them into the wreath. I like the way they look next to the pumpkins, so I'm going to add some of those next to each of the pumpkins. Then I'm going to take some of the white flowers, cut them off. Actually, these just actually pulled right off of the stems. And then I'm going to place some of these in between where I put the pumpkins and just add a little bit more white in between those pumpkins and just begin to fill in and build this wreath. So I'm just continuing to add wherever I see a hole or a bare spot, and just kind of looking at the overall composition of the wreath and seeing what I think would look good in a certain spot as far as the colors and the textures. And it sounds complicated, but it's really not. You just pick different things and hold it up there and see how it looks, and then just continue to fill it in until you're happy with it. Then once I have all of the leaves and flowers where I want them, then I am going to add my thankful word to this wreath, and I am just securing it with a little bit of hot glue on several of the leaves and the pumpkins, and it's really light so it doesn't take a lot to hold it in place. I am really pleased with the way that this wreath turned out. I know you really can't see the glitter or shimmer on all of the pieces that I sprayed. It doesn't come across on the video real well, but in real life it looks gorgeous. I love how it looks on my door, especially since I have this kind of red burgundy colored door. It just looks really nice, and I am super happy with it. For this, I used one of the styrofoam pumpkins from Dollar Tree. And I will also be using 3 of the faux succulents, and I have still seen these at my Dollar Tree, so hopefully you'll still be able to pick these up now. I'll also be using some Waverly chalk paint in the color of ivory. Now, I did spray paint my pumpkin white first, and it did not work well. The spray paint does not go with the styrofoam pumpkin. It makes it sticky and has like a chemical reaction or something, and it doesn't dry. Don't spray paint the pumpkin, just paint it with a brush and some chalk paint. Or I'm sure you could use just some acrylic craft paint as well. And actually using the brush gets into the seam better and just kind of fills in all the little holes in the styrofoam too. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of truffle colored chalk paint and just do a little bit of dry brushing on the pumpkin to add a little bit of distressing or just some dimension and different shades to the pumpkin. For this next step, I will be using my hot glue gun, and I usually use Gorilla Glue sticks, but regular glue sticks would work for this as well. Once I have that glued down, I'm going to remove the faux succulents from the little pots that they come in, and they just pull right out, so it's not hard at all. You just pull them out of the pot, and then you can use some hot glue, or you can use the stem of the succulent and push it down into the styrofoam pumpkin. Just whatever works best for you. I found that I was able just to press mine down into the styrofoam pumpkin and they stayed put real well. Then lastly, I just took some scissors and trimmed up the Spanish moss a little bit, and then it was finished. I'm going to be using the Arteza 3D fabric paint. So there are a lot of fun colors in here, and while these are great to embellish fabric projects, today I am going to be using them in a little bit different way. I am going to be using them on glass. So I'm just using a clear candle holder that I picked up at Dollar Tree. You can use this technique on any kind of glass vase or candle holder, and it's really easy to do. Since I am making this for fall and Thanksgiving, I am going to use some of the kind of fall colors in the metallic paint, and they have some beautiful colors like bronze and copper and gold, and so I'm going to be using the bronze, and then I'm also going to use the metallic gold as well as a glitter gold. So I'm going to start at the bottom of my candle holder, and I am going to use just even pressure and make kind of a subtle squiggly line up toward the top, and as I get to the height that I want my paint to stop, then I'm going to release the pressure a little bit so that I get kind of a fine point at the top. And I'm making these different heights and just kind of random. I'm leaving a little bit of space in between them, and I'm going to go all the way around my candle holder. So you do have to be careful that you don't smudge this or get your fingers in it, but then once I'm all the way around, I'm going to set this down and just let it dry completely. And I actually let mine dry overnight. And this is what it looks like once it's dry. And now I'm going to take another color. I've decided to use this gold, and I'm going to do the same thing, just kind of going in between the lines that I've already done, and in several places I'm going to cross over and so that they overlap a little bit, just to give it a little bit more interest. And you can see that adding the second color, this brighter metallic gold, is really brightening this up and giving it the dimension that I'm looking for, and it's really coming together nicely. So again, once I'm done with that second color, I let it dry completely, and now I'm going to go back in with a third color. This time I decided to use this gold glitter, and it's actually kind of a clear paint with just gold glitter. And so now that my other colors are completely dry, I can just go in over the top and add this glitter just to really finish it off. And once that was dry, I added an LED candle from the Dollar Tree. I would not recommend using a real candle because I'm not sure how the 3D paint would hold up to the heat of a real flame. So I would just use an LED candle. Here I'm showing it with another vase from Dollar Tree that I have added some decorative mesh and some lights to, and I think that they look beautiful together. So it's just a really easy way to dress up a candle holder or a vase. And I will show you how I assembled this vase with the mesh in it in just a moment. So to create that tall lighted vase, I am just using a tall vase from Dollar Tree. I'm using one roll of this decorative fall mesh that I picked up at Dollar Tree as well with the gold looking leaves. And I'm using a string of lights. This one I actually picked up at Target in their dollar spot. It was $3, but I really love the little pumpkin shaped lights. You could use lights from Dollar Tree as well. I love this mesh because the leaves are gold on one side and silver on the other, and it's just really beautiful. So all I'm going to be doing is wrapping that mesh around the battery pack several times to kind of disguise that, and then I am going to twist the lights in with the mesh and just poke those down inside the vase, kind of arranging the lights as I go. And you can use as little or as much of the mesh as you want. And I think it makes a beautiful accent, and I love the fact that it's lighted, but it really looks beautiful even with the lights off as well. For my next project, I'm going to be using this wooden pumpkin that I picked up in the Crafter's Square section of Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using the acrylic paint markers from Arteza. These are something that I have been wanting to try for a while now, so I'm excited to use them for this. I'm going to use a craft stick just to test out a few colors to see exactly which ones I want to use. When you first use these, you shake up the marker and then you press the tip down until the paint fills the tip, and then you'll know it's ready to use. So I decided to paint the stems in this brown color, and then I chose one of the orange colors for the pumpkin. And what I was really looking for on these paint markers was to see how well it covered, and then also to see if there were stroke marks. Like when you color with a marker, you get those lines for each of the strokes, and so I was wondering if these would be that way, and they are totally not that way. I was really impressed with these. They covered really well in just one coat, unlike sometimes with paint you have to do 2 or 3 coats. These just one coat and it was good to go. And also I did not see the stroke marks of the paint pen. So I'm really impressed with these. Good job, Arteza, on the acrylic paint markers. Once I had my pumpkin painted on the front and the back, then I decided to add a little bit of this green moss. This is some I picked up at Walmart. You can get different colors of moss at Dollar Tree as well. And I decided not to paint the inside of the pumpkin just because I liked the contrast that it gave, especially when you were looking through the pumpkin with those cutouts in the front. You could see the lighter color, and I really liked that. So I'm just adding this moss using some hot glue, and I'm doing this all the way around the base of the pumpkin. Then I'm going to trim any wild ends of the moss with some scissors. Then I'm going to tie a couple of bows using some Dollar Tree ribbon. I really like this burlap ribbon with the fall leaves on it. and I'm going to tie a bow, just a really simple bow, to put at the base of each stem on each side of the pumpkin. And then on the solid side of the pumpkin, I'm going to take this little wooden thankful sticker that I picked up at the dollar spot at Target, and I am going to add that to the center just to finish it off. So this could be displayed as is, or you could use it as a holder for some florals, or you can maybe even put some candies or something in it and give as a gift to someone. But it would even look great with one of those LED candles in it, and I think the glow coming through those cutouts is just really pretty. So it's very versatile and very easy to make. First, you will need some sort of basket or container, and I picked this one up at a thrift store for $1. It is about 10 inches in diameter. You also need some burlap, and you can get this at Walmart for $3 a yard, and you'll only need about 1/4 of a yard. I'll also be using some black felt. This is just 3 pieces that I got from Walmart. You can also get it from Dollar Tree. And any type of fabric. This is just a fat quarter that I picked up from Walmart for 98 cents. You can use any pattern or color that you like. I'll be using some of this polyester fiber fill. This is just something that I had on hand, and you can really use anything to stuff the head and the arms of the Scarecrow. I always say just use what you've got. And then I am using a little bit of jute twine, and you can pick this up at Dollar Tree or Walmart or any craft store. I'll also be using just a little bit of raffia, and this is some I got at Dollar Tree. I'll be using a black and an orange Sharpie marker to draw the face for the Scarecrow. And I'll be using my hot glue gun with some Gorilla Glue sticks just because that's what I have and that's what I like to use. So I'll be using some various items to trace my shapes, but I have included a link in the description box below to all of the pattern pieces that you will need to make this. So if you don't want to figure it out you're on your own, you can get those patterns and use those. So I am cutting a double layer of burlap in this circle for the head, and it is about, I think, 6 inches, maybe a little bit larger, but like I said, the pattern is in the description box below. Next, I'm going to hot glue the 2 circles together around the edge, and I will leave about a 2 to 3 inch opening so that I'll be able to stuff it with the fiber fill. But before I stuff it, I want to draw the face on this. So I'm using the orange Sharpie to draw a triangle for the nose. And then I will be using the black Sharpie to draw the eyes and the mouth and the eyebrows. Then once the face is drawn, I can stuff the head with the fiber fill and close up the opening using my hot glue gun. To make the arms, I am using a double layer of burlap, and these are about 9 inches long and about 3 inches wide. Just make sure it's big enough to fit the pattern for the arm on. And then I'll trace my pattern onto the burlap and cut them out. So I'm going to take my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue all the way around the outside edge of the arms and just glue these two pieces together, and I'm just going to leave the straight end open, and that's where I'll be able to put the stuffing in. And for this, it is really useful to use something like a pencil or the end of a paintbrush to help push that stuffing down into the thumb and the end of the hand. And once I have it stuffed as much as I want, then I am going to just hot glue the end of it together. And I am trimming off some of the bigger strings that are hanging off, but it's okay to have some of them be a little bit rough and ragged because it is a Scarecrow and he's kind of supposed to look that way. Next, I'm using a chalk marker to trace my brim of the hat pattern onto the felt, and then I'll cut that out. And I just cut on the inside of the line so that I don't get any of the white from the chalk marker showing on my hat. Then I'm going to use the cardboard circle pattern to cut that circle out of cardboard for the top of the hat, and I'll also cut the other black felt circle out for the top of the hat. Now I'm going to roll a little ball of the fiber fill up and set it on top of the felt, and then put the cardboard circle on top of that, and then I'll just pull up the black felt up around that fiber fill and glue it to the cardboard circle to just make a little pillow that's going to sit on top of that hat brim piece to make the Scarecrow's hat. Then I'm just going to hot glue that to the center of the brim piece. Then I'm going to take some twine and just wrap it around about 4 times just to make a hat band for his hat. And I just secured both ends with a little bit of hot glue. Next, I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to figure out about how much I need for this, and so I'm going to lay it out, and I want the fabric to reach about halfway around my basket. So I just kind of eyeballed this and measured it with my basket to see if I had a length that was good. Then I laid the arms on this and rolled the fabric around it just because I want to have enough fabric so that I can glue it into a tube that the arms will fit in, and these are going to be his sleeves. Then once I have my piece cut, I took it and I did iron it to get all those creases out of it, and then I'm going to glue it together, and I'm just folding it in half and gluing it right down one edge, and I found this was the easiest way to do it. And then I'll just turn it inside out so I'll have a tube and it will look almost like a sewn seam. Then I will take one of the arms and just slip it into one end of the tube, and then I will use a little piece of jute twine to tie a bow around that and secure that. And you could glue it if you wanted to, but I didn't find that it was really necessary. And then I'm just going to repeat this step for the other arm, and you just want to make sure that the thumbs are both facing the same direction. And that's all there is to making his arms. So now it's time to assemble our Scarecrow. I'm going to glue his head to the inside of the basket, and you can see here that I made a little oops when I was drawing his face the first time. I got his eyes a little off center, but that's not going to show. So I'm just going to use some hot glue and glue the head to the basket. And next I'm just going to take a little bit of raffia. I'm just taking several pieces and folding them over and gluing them to his head just to make a little bit of hair that'll be coming out of the sides from underneath his hat. Then I'm going to hot glue the hat to the top of his head, and I folded the top of his head over a little bit and glued the hat on, and then I'm going to also attach the back of the hat to the basket behind his head to secure it. And then I just kind of played with his hat and found some places where I kind of wanted to secure it down just to make it lay right, just to give it a cute look. So now I'm going to attach his arms, and I want to make sure that the seam is facing the basket so it doesn't show, and I'm just going to position his hands where I want them to be and glue those down first so that they're in the position where they should be. And don't worry if you have extra fabric at the back of the basket, because we're going to fix that in a minute. So as you can see, I have some extra fabric, and I am just going to turn the basket over, and I am going to just gather up that extra fabric and fold it over, and then I'm just going to use my hot glue gun and secure that down so it lays nicely. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of extra hot glue over by his hands just to make sure that they are secured well. Then for the last step, I'm going to take some jute twine, wrap it around my hand 3 or 4 times. I'm going to take a little piece of twine and tie it around the center, and I'm just making a bow to put on his hat to finish him off. And now this cute little scarecrow is ready to hand out some treats.